Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and excited to tell you that the second edition of the Codist is now available. If you have been sending out your 23andMe kit and so excited that your DNA has been tested and now you know who you are, well, let me tell you that there's other people who want to know who you are, especially if you're in the line of Aaron. Now, there is a Y chromosome marker in your DNA that says that you are a direct descendant of the line of Aaron. Well, what does that mean to you? That means that you are a target, that if Satan can take you out, he can keep Jesus from returning. Now, we saw him enlist everybody from Pharaoh to Haman to Herod to Hitler, all the way through. And now you're reading about database hacks and you're reading about information hacks. What if your DNA was being hacked in a laboratory somewhere in Tehran right now? There's 200 Russian geneticists working to weaponize that DNA. Not a joke, not a mystery, but one revealed here in the pages of the Codist, just $2.99 on Kindle. And if you visit ignitinganation.com, our homepage, and scroll to the bottom under Special Offers, you're going to find a copy of my latest book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. You have to ask yourself the question, if the Garden of Eden was so important to God, and the Tree of Life was so important to God, why don't we ever talk about it? And what lessons did he want us to learn in that very tree? Well, this takes you through 7 components of a tree, beginning with the ground, all the way down through the roots, up through the trunk, out to the branches, to the leaves, and then out to the fruit, and takes you on a journey through 7 biblical truths in each part of that tree, 49 in all, where God uses the things of the natural to reveal supernatural truths to us. Give us your email. We'll give you the first chapter for free, and we won't send you spam, because spam is not kosher. I'm excited this morning to have as our guest Michelle Ule, author of the book Mrs Oswald Chambers. That's correct, Mrs Oswald Chambers, the woman behind the world's best-selling devotional. Michelle Ule, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you very much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Michelle is a best-selling novelist. She's read My Utmost for His Highest as her daily devotional for every year since 1999. Trained as a newspaper reporter, she blogs regularly on Oswald Chambers, travel and spiritual topics, and taught women's Bibles for 30 years. She lives in Northern California. Learn more about her at www.michelleule.com. Well, before we get into this incredible, really, this is a tabloid kind of expose. There's certainly nothing tabloidish about it, but it is something that reveals that over 13 million people have this book in print. The number of people that sign up for the daily blog, the daily devotion, churches sending it out, it's got to be in the, I would estimate, based on the number of people I know, far past its 13 million in print. As a matter of fact, My Utmost has been in print without any break since its date of release. It's never been out of print. That's quite extraordinary. But tell us a little bit more about Michelle Ule, the biographer, and how you got yourself involved in this project.
Well, as you said, I'm a novelist. I've had 6 novellas published prior to writing this book. And I was at work one day. I actually worked for my literary agent, and all I did was go to work. And an editor called from New York. She was looking for an inspirational historical novel set during World War I. Janet said, well, we'll get back to you. And she and I talked about the idea. Couldn't really come up with an inspirational story out of the war until I said, oh, wait a minute, what about the Oswald Chambers story? And Janet said, what Oswald Chambers story? And I said, well, he basically led a revival among the troops in Egypt during the war. And she said, well, can you write that? And there's only one answer to that question: yes. So I started all of my research, and as I wrote the novel, Biddy and Oswald are characters in the novel, and Biddy kept changing my storyline, which isn't uncommon in a novel, but in pretty significant ways. And when I ran into a member of the Oswald Chambers Publication Association in Scotland 8 or 9 months into the writing, I said, gosh, have you guys thought about writing a book about Biddy? Because she's a pretty extraordinary character. And Nicholas Gray said, well, no, but maybe you're the person to write it. So when I finished the novel, which has not yet been published, I started on the biography and found that she was even more extraordinary as a follower of Jesus than even I had realized in writing my book, the novel.
Well, for everyone's information, Biddy is the name of Oswald Chambers' wife. And from what I understand, she was, and not to give away a lot of the storyline, but she came from the generation of stenography, the generation of people that could write shorthand. And so this is kind of a lost art, note-taking and things like that. We record, we video, we do all kinds of things. But going back to, and I remember the steno pad, the shorthand, and you had to be trained to write in shorthand and transcribe, but they found it to be incredibly accurate, even to the point where now they have machines, which the court reporter does, and you would think with 26 letters, you'd have 26 keys, like our QWERTY keyboard, but no, they have quite a few less keys on that. But the art of stenography has now been translated into court reporting, and then I have a friend who's in the closed captioning business, and she uses a similar machine she does for deaf students at the University of Alabama while they're in coursework, and it appears on their laptop as she types out what the professor is saying. So it's quite an extraordinary skill. I unfortunately didn't take typing in high school. I know that my sisters took shorthand. This was back in the 50s. So that was something that was still taught. Were you taught shorthand?
No, not at all. But it's interesting. The women in my Bible study are in their 70s, 80s, and I even have one who will be 100 next month. And they all studied shorthand in school. But by the time I was in school, it was all typing. Biddy was an extraordinary stenographer. She took down with pencil and pen at 250 words per minute. That is twice as fast as I am speaking to you right now. I'm considered a pretty good typist. I usually transcribe my interviews. When I interview people, I just type up the notes, and I type at only 125 words per minute. So she was able to just keep right up, no problems at all. And then that's what she did. When she married Oswald, he had a vision as a pastor that he would preach. She would take it all down and they would turn it into books. They discussed that before they were married, and there is some sense that she may have taken down an entire book while she was on her honeymoon. Oswald was a pretty determined man, and off they went. So she took down everything he said. She attended all of his lectures at the Bible Training College in London prior to World War I, and then she went to Egypt with him during the war when he was a YMCA chaplain, and he preached then in the YMCA tent, the hut, and she took down everything he said. So she had 7 years worth of notes transcribed just explicitly, verbatim, when he died in 1917.
You know, we look at Oswald Chambers as such a contemporary author, the wisdom. I came out of the Jewish world, so you'll appreciate the fact that I got a call asking me to do, they wanted to premiere release on the lost sermons of Spurgeon.
Sure.
Except I didn't know who Spurgeon was. And then they came to me and they said, we want you to do a special on the 500th year of the Reformation, and I said I'd be happy to, but what was it? I grew up
Yeah.
in a synagogue, and I came to faith in Jesus in a synagogue, so I
Sure.
really wasn't ever exposed to the church. But I have a friend in the Washington, D.C. area, Bill Koenig, who is a White House correspondent and the author of a book called Eye to Eye, and runs a website, watch.org, and he was the one that said to me that my utmost for his highest was the single most influential devotional in his life. And as he was saying that, he handed me a leather-bound copy of it for myself and said, I pray, and wrote inside, I pray that this changes your life as much as it changed mine. So, I didn't think anything of it. Here's this well-known name. My utmost for its highest is just it rolls off the tongue. Everybody knows it. But Oswald Chambers is I guess he's the author, but he wasn't the writer.
I like to say that Oswald provided the words, the Holy Spirit inspired words, and Biddy turned those words into books. We would not know anything about Oswald Chambers or any of that wisdom without Biddy. But without Oswald's words, there is nothing for Biddy to have turned into a book. She felt very strongly that the teachings that her husband provided were ones that men and women would return to often over the generations, which has proven to be true for 91 years. I have been reading it for a long time, but this last year I started writing a response. I call it Utmost Response. I posted on my Facebook writer page, in which I take apart each reading, trying to explain what's really there. Because a lot of people will say, I don't understand it, I read it, but I don't really get it. And it's been phenomenal for me, who's been a Christian for 45 years, to take those apart and see the depth of the truth that's there in something I've been reading for 20 years nearly. It's just truly astounding. And Dr. Kim Boas said the reason that it resonates even now is that Oswald only used biblical examples for his teaching. He didn't use contemporary ones. Otherwise, we'd be reading about the clopping of the horse going down the road, or the weapons in the air, I suppose, in Egypt. So it has stood the test of time because it is grounded and explicitly Scripture. That's what it is, and it's life-changing, really.
Well, to be honest, what appealed to me about it was the fact that it was Scripture, and there's no word in English called biblicist, but that's what I am. I'm a biblicist. I am someone who says that the words contained in this one book, not 66 books, but one book, written by one author, not 41 authors, one author, okay, sure. 41 biddies.
Maybe so, yeah.
These were, in Hebrew, a sofer or a scribe.
Sure.
They were recording the words of God. In many cases, he says, write this down and tell my people this. So the commentaries that are out there, I actually call them commentators. And a commentator is something I put in the oven at 425 for about an hour, and then I like butter and salt on mine. That would be a commentator, an ordinary potato.
Yes.
But Oswald Chambers, or Biddy in this case, stayed true to form.
Yes.
In a devotional on fulfilling the instruction or the command, study the Word, not about the Word, not this person's opinion or this person's opinion, but get to know God's opinion on this matter. And as you sojourn through this very extensive devotional, you will touch on so many important, significant, and relevant ponderables, and open your Bible to find out, well, why did this person say this? Or what were the circumstances? Here I'm giving the snippet, but what was the before and the after? And he does that.
The interesting thing about both Oswald and Biddy is that they were very focused on the missionary work. The Bible Training College in Clapham Common was designed for people wanting to go into ministry. That's what they were teaching. That's what they were training. But we are all ministers of the gospel. We're all missionaries.
Yes.
And so we all need to understand Scripture and study it to be able to answer questions as they come up and apply them to our general life. When they went to Egypt, they were in a YMCA hut in a camp surrounded by Anzac soldiers, Australian and New Zealand soldiers, who Oswald was very keenly aware of, were either going up the line to Jerusalem, the battle for Jerusalem through the Sinai Desert, or they were headed to the trenches of France. Their eternity was teetering. They were teetering on eternity right then as they were preparing to go. And he wanted to make sure that they understood where their lives, their eternal life was in the balance. And that's why he basically led a revival among those troops. More than one man said it was almost worth enlisting to be able to hear Oswald Chambers speak. That's where their goal was. That's where their focus was. And perhaps that's why it resonates even more, because we are all to be proclaimers of the gospel, no matter where we are in life. God puts us there for a purpose, and we're to talk about him.
Biddy is such an interesting she created the legacy of Oswald Chambers.
She did.
She brought life to it, and I'm looking at the timeline of his life. He was born on July 24th of 1874. He accepted Jesus age 15.
Through Spurgeon, by the way.
What's that?
Through Spurgeon. He heard Spurgeon talk.
He heard Spurgeon. Right, exactly. He heard the lost now what's called the Lost Sermons of Charles Spurgeon, which is now in a leather-bound edition, were the ones that there were many that were recorded, but then they found boxes of sermon notes that they're now releasing 100 years later. In 1901, he began teaching and preaching throughout England, Scotland, the United States, and Japan, which was highly unusual for intercontinental travel to preach. It was one thing to go to Africa or to a nation to colonize and to settle, but usually the missionary that went became the local parish priest, or they were in the pastorate there. They built it, they led it, the people identified with them, they related with them, but he was not that type of, he was more of an evangelist.
Exactly. He went to Japan just to see how the missionary lifestyle worked in Japan. He connected with Charles and Letty Cowman of the Oriental Missionary Society. He wasn't there but maybe 6-8 weeks, and then he had to return to England. But he took away from that the need for missionary training. And from that encounter, he put together what later became the Bible Training College, recognizing how things worked. He himself had attended a Bible training college in Dunoon, Scotland, where people lived in. And that's why when he and Biddy were married in 1910, they began the Bible training college with 24 students who lived in, and then countless students, thousands of students who over the years, the 4.5 years of the school, came to evening courses. And it was all about finding how God wanted to use you for his purposes in life and training you for that purpose. Yes. He also, in the United States, he spoke at camp meetings up and down the eastern seaboard for 3 or 4 summers. He was part of the Holiness Movement with God's Bible School. He taught there for 6 months. He liked Americans, and he took a train across the United States and loved our country, too. So good job.
So his first book was Biblical Psychology.
Exactly.
Published in 1912 in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is still way ahead of his time. They had a daughter, and in November 15th of 1917, he died of complications from an appendectomy.
Yes.
Now, My Utmost for His Highest was not published in the United States until 1934.
Correct.
So this was, were you able to get into anybody that knew her or one generation from her to be able to interview to find out what her, or did she leave copious notes as to why and what, and what was her motivation for doing this? Certainly she believed. I can see her as, in some ways, as the moon-eyed love of his life, but they were Scottish, and that's just not something that that goes with the. Not that they're not a romantic people, but it's just not. It's not in vogue, if you would, at that time, to be mooning and over your husband.
No, I wouldn't say she was. She was a very practical, down-to-earth person. They loved each other with an extraordinary love. Oswald was a poet. He had never expected that God would allow him to have a wife, but once he got one, he made sure she knew she was well loved. He wrote her lots of notes. She burned all of her notes. She was really Biddy was looking to hide. She never put her name on any book. Initials a couple of times. She was a little interesting to ferret out. Her daughter Kathleen, who lived to be 85, 86 years old, sat for interviews with the Chambers biographer David McCaslin in 1991. And I took a lot of notes off of the interview that I was able to see, and also a transcription of her notes, which are all at Wheaton College. And that's where I learned the most about Biddy. Also at Wheaton, there are papers that some of their friends left. I had the honor of corresponding with the daughter of one of her closest friends and the son of one of her closest friends, who are both in their 90s and don't remember ever meeting her, though I know they did because I saw that in her notes.
Right. We've been talking with Michelle Ule, author of Mrs Oswald Chambers, the woman behind the world's best-selling devotional. If you, like me, thought Oswald Chambers penned every one of those devotions and he put this book out and he was this world best-selling author, the truth of the matter is that his wife Biddy is actually the author of My Utmost for His Highest. And it is a compilation of notes and sermons and devotionals truly devoted to the inerrant Word of God, not Oswald Chambers or Mrs. Oswald Chambers' opinion about the application of God's Word, but God's Word itself. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to dig into more of this fascinating biography of Biddy Oswald, the real writer behind My Utmost for His Highest. We'll be right back. Back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Back. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Michelle Ule, author of Mrs Oswald Chambers, the woman behind the world's best-selling devotional. Michelle, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Michelle, how shocked are people to find out? Is it a bubble burster when people find out that Oswald Chambers did not actually write My Utmost for His Highest?
I think they're mostly really surprised because, as you've indicated, a lot of people simply don't know that it was first published 10 years after Oswald died. They're also very interested in why Biddy did it and who she was and why they don't know anything about her. So it always gives me an avenue to talk about what an extraordinary compiler she was, editor. She was truly gifted in a wonderful way. And we have all of Oswald's books because of Biddy Chambers, whose real name, by the way, was Gertrude Annie Hobbs. Oswald nicknamed her beloved disciple so as to keep her separate in his mind from his sister, whose name was also Gertrude. Well, beloved disciple soon became a bit of a mouthful. Oh, beloved disciple, would you like a cup of tea?
Right.
Oh, beloved disciple, can you take this down? So he shortened it to BD, the initials, which then morphed into Biddy, and that's who she was for the rest of her life, even to her family members.
So in your research into her life, and for those who love My Utmost for His Highest, and they love the writings of Oswald Chambers, it would stand to reason that they would really want to know the story behind it and how it came to be. What was her intent? What was her desire? What outcome was she looking for in sharing these tremendously insightful messages from her husband?
She believed that he had things to say to people that they wanted to hear. After he died so suddenly in 1917, they were living in Egypt in the middle of a World War I YMCA camp. The YMCA asked Biddy and her 4-year-old daughter to stay on through the duration of the war. She got countless letters from people expressing dismay that Oswald had died, and she wanted to respond to each one of them, but there were so many that it would become impossible. So Jimmy Hansen, one of their YMCA chaplain friends, suggested that she put together a little pamphlet of Oswald Chambers' teaching and send that out, which she did to everyone who had written to her. And then they all wrote back and wanted more. So she put together another talk and sent that out. They wanted more. And finally, the YMCA stepped in and said, look, you get the pamphlet ready and we'll take care of the printing and the mailing. And it was free, but it went out to 10,000 copies every single month through the end of the war, which for her was verification, confirmation that God had given her a gift to be able to present Oswald's teaching to people. Remember, at the end of World War I, the world was horrible. I mean, 20 million people died from the Spanish flu. When she returned to England, the country was broken. It nearly went Bolshevik. There were no jobs. 1 million men had been destroyed. Any women who had work in England were asked to leave work so soldiers could take the job. But she knew that these pamphlets, this teaching, was really important. So she went to a publisher friend who read through them and said, nah, there's nothing here. Meanwhile, the people who had backed the Bible Training College asked her, she wanted to come on board and run their women's Bible Training College. It would give her a place to live. It would give her some sort of an income, a stipend. She would have a place for her daughter, and these were people she really liked. She prayed about it and thought about it. She knew that for the sake of regular publishing, there was no chance, but she could do this. But she knew God had called her to put those words together. So she turned her back on security and became a self-publisher in 1921. And that's basically what she did for the rest of her life. She took all of those notes and turned them into books, into pamphlets, into a journal for 20 years. And you know, God got the glory, and we have my utmost for his highest for that very reason. You know, it's an interesting question. One of the most asked questions, the most read blog posts on my website is, why did God allow Oswald Chambers to die so young? He was at the height of his ministry. He was only 43 years old. He had a whole lifetime ahead of him. And one of the soldiers who knew him at the time later became a Church of England pastor. Pulford is the last name. And he wrote that if Oswald hadn't died, Biddy would not have turned his words into books. And we would not have my utmost for his highest. You know, it's an interesting question. Is a book worth a life harder for Biddy and Kathleen to live without him? And yet his words went everywhere because he died so young. And my utmost for his highest was smuggled into POWs during World War II in Germany. Brother Andrew smuggled it across the Iron Curtain borders for years and years and years. There's a valuable teaching in that book that has just held the hearts of so many for so long. That was the motivation. She believed God had called her.
The spin-offs from My Utmost for His Highest, there's an app now where you can get the daily devotionals added to a nice piece of graphics. You can post on your Facebook page or your Twitter feed. You personally did something that I want to commend you on. You put at the bottom of each one of your pages tweetables.
Yes.
Now, I took advantage of that when I saw it last night, and you saw it because you liked it and forwarded it. You were appearing on our show today, and I used your tweetable. I thought that was absolutely a brilliant touch. As a matter of fact, I have an email to our people saying, why don't we embed tweetables? Here's you know, we can give you all the hashtags in the world, but why not just make it really easy and they can just then add what they want to it. So kudos to you for navigating a modern world with what would be considered to be really, it's the 100th anniversary. I guess pretty close to the 100th anniversary of the publication of this. What was the year it came out?
1927 in England, so
Okay,
it's
so
91st year, 100 years since Oswald died.
What part of Biddy is in My Utmost?
Because I am familiar with Biddy's life, I was able to see 5 distinct readings in which I believe she showed her emotions. The July 13th reading, when you're writing a devotional, you anchor your devotionals with specific dates. Christmas is Christmas and so forth. July 13th is her birthday. And it was interesting to see what she wrote on that day. She used the Isaiah passage, I saw the Lord. And she said, in the year, and okay, she's using Oswald's words that he spoke at some lecture. And then she is putting them into that reading, compiling them with a couple other quotations from that reading. But I believe she uses that also to show her emotions. In the year that King Uzziah died, did I fall apart? Did I get sick? No, I saw the Lord. And so I believe she's saying, my husband died, but I focused on the Lord. And that is quintessential Biddy. It always came back to the Lord. On the day that Oswald Chambers died, November 15th, think how many times in the 10 years between his death and the compilation of My Utmost, she was asked, why would God take Oswald away? Well, that one is just right in your face. It's taken from the passage in Scripture where the disciples are asking Jesus what's going to happen to them. And he tells Peter he's going to die. And Peter points to John and says, well, what about him? And Jesus says, what is that to you? That's the title of that reading. And it goes on to talk about one of Oswald's signature comments. We are in great danger when we try to be an amateur providence in someone else's life. We have no idea what God is doing in someone else's life. We cannot ask that question because it's none of our business. Biddy is essentially saying that in that November 15 post. But when you turn the page to November 16, I mean, I read that and was like, whoa, Biddy, that's really hardcore. When you turn the page to November 16th, the title is very simple. It's Still Human. She wrote all those titles, but she's telling us that even though her husband has had this death and it's been so significant, and she's going to go strong with the Lord knows what he's doing, she's still human. She still misses him. And I thought that was very poignant.
So she maintained the integrity of her husband's words, couched by the deep love that she had for him, by edifying him in the closest possible translation to exactly what he said, because she was gifted as a great stenographer. Now, when you frame it all like this, you say it's God's providence, it's God's design that he would bring a stenographer into his life, that he would pass at an early age, and she would use the gifts that he gave her to memorialize these great teachings.
Exactly.
So it makes quite a bit of sense. Now, a lot has not been made about Biddy. There's just, I don't get the phone calls. Oh, I've got this great insightful story about Biddy Oswald. I had never heard of Biddy Oswald. This book introduces you to the person of Biddy Oswald, who is really the author behind the world's best-selling devotional. But what you do in it is you reveal her parallel integrity.
True. Yes.
It's a mirrored integrity. It's as if God took two people of high integrity and high moral character and strong love of the Word of God and married them. And when he passed, he cut no tie to them. What he did was he pulled her forward through life without him, because she still had, I hear his voice, yes, I hear his voice because I see his words. He's right next to me because I have this stack of journals with everything he said because I recorded it all.
Precisely. Yeah.
Imagine the sheer joy that she had, that as she devoted her life's work to continuing his life's work, what an amazing picture of unity that we see in the body of this marriage and of this person. It's just a fascinating read. What were, I'm sure that during the course of your research there were a number of surprises, things that caught you off guard that said, oh, I wouldn't have thought that, or, that's really quite interesting or unusual. Share several of those with us, if you would.
Well, first I'd like to comment on what Kathleen Chambers said about her mother. She said, my mother worked with my father's words every single day. It was, even though Kathleen was 4 when her father died, she said it was like he had just gone into the next room because she lived with those words. And Biddy herself said that as she would read them and work with them, she could picture where she was when she took them down. She wrote to someone, I wish you could see the tent and feel the heat of the desert when I took down these words. But she was so focused on believing that God was involved with everything that happened in her life. Kathleen said that Oswald, her father, used to say, look for God in the haphazard of life. Biddy Chambers became a fine stenographer because she had bad bronchitis and had to drop out of school when she was 15. She needed to help with the family income because her father died 6 months later. And so she focused herself on learning stenography and then typing because she wanted to be the first female secretary to the Prime Minister of England. Instead, she became really the secretary to the creator of the universe when she took down Oswald's words and translated them into these books that we can read. I like to say that Biddy Chambers' decision to believe that God was in the middle of anything, we call it pulling a Biddy in my family. Now, when we come up against something that makes no sense, what could God possibly be doing here? Well, I'm going to pull a Biddy, and I'm going to believe that he's in the middle of this, even though it makes no sense to me at all. After My Utmost for His Highest became a very popular book, a committee formed around Biddy to help her with publication decisions, the types of paper, the binding, because she was a self-publisher. They called themselves the Oswald Chambers Publication Association, and they are still at work today, disseminating information about Oswald Chambers, a wonderful group of people. Well, as World War II approached in England, Biddy lived just north of London. There was a lot of discussion about the Blitz. What would happen if the books were caught on fire, we lost the books? And the British government asked people to insure those books once they reached a certain number of value in the books. And the Oswald Chambers Association, with Biddy and Lee, decided that in keeping with Oswald's teachings that God is in the midst of anything, no matter what happens, they would not insure those books. And they wrote and said, well, if the worst happens and they're gone, then they are gone. And on December 29, 1940, the very worst happened. There's a very famous photograph of St. Paul's Cathedral wreathed in smoke. It's like the Blitz photo. But it's not St. Paul's on fire. It's all the warehouses, the book-selling warehouses that have surrounded St. Paul's since Shakespeare's day. The Nazis dropped 23,000 bombs, incendiary bombs, and they burned up for 1 million books that night. They called it the crematorium of the books of England. Everything burned, including every Oswald Chambers book, the canon that had not been sold at that point. Made for a very interesting meeting a month later when the Oswald Chambers Publication Group got together. And Biddy, again, who believed that God was in the midst of anything, said, if this is the end of the books, this is the end of the books, and God will give us something else to do. She was totally at peace with what had happened, even though her ministry, in a sense, had burned to the ground, right, or been destroyed by the water. But, then they found some plates over here. They found 1,500 copies of My Utmost for His Highest over here that hadn't been bound. And by the end of the war, they were back in business. They all had everything. All the books were back. And Biddy spent the rest of her life transcribing, repackaging and compiling more material until really the last couple of years before her death when she became very ill.
How old was she? I mean, what year did she die?
She died in 1966. She was 83 years old. Yeah.
Do you think that she is a victim, not in the victim sense, but a victim of the church's lack of edification of women? That this hidden story that Biddy, it's in some circles I'm sure it's well known, but to the general populace it is not well known. And I've never heard an accreditation to Biddy Oswald as being the true author of My Utmost for His Highest. It's always been Oswald Chambers, Oswald Chambers. Do you think that in our society we've looked upon this, and when she passed, I wasn't a Christian. 1966, you say I was 14 years old. It wouldn't have had any impact on me, but as I do a lot of research for my shows, and have a command of the topic and the subject, and have read the books that are sent to me, I find that she's not been elevated in any way. Not that that was her desire, but that we haven't paid the due respect and honor to her worthy of truly being the author of the best-selling devotional of all time. Is that a symptom of our don't let a woman teach? Actually, this week I'm doing a segment with an author. I've had her on before, that we're going to talk about the handmaiden conspiracy, the mistranslation of Paul's writings when it came to the role of women, and how it's been applied in the church, and based on a great deal of research into the exact translation, and the contextual translation has been somewhat misapplied. Do you see Biddy Oswald as being a victim of some of that?
No, it was a deliberate decision to keep herself hidden. And the Bible Training College taught women as well as men. It was pretty evenly distributed. And among the students who followed them, really, to Egypt with the YMCA were pretty much the same number of men as women. Several of those women, Gladys Ingram Donathorne in particular, married and went on to China, where she was a missionary for the rest of her life. People have written about her. Several others became pastor wives, or one was a missionary to Persia. I don't think it was Biddy's decision at all. I think they were from the Holiness Movement, the League of Prayer in England, and women were teachers there. The head of the League of Prayer, once Rita Harris died, was his wife. I don't believe that's true at all. I think it was a deliberate decision on her part to keep herself hidden. It may have been just because of the times. I mean, 1928, was she likely to want to announce who she was? Oswald Chambers was a far bigger name, and people knew him because he had preached with the League of Prayer. People had flocked to see him in Egypt. I think it was that decision and not anything to do with God. I have to say, though, Kathleen wasn't sure how happy her mother would be if a book was written about her, and I'm a little nervous about going to heaven. I may have to sneak in the back door, so I miss her for a couple thousand years. But I think Oswald will be laughing and totally pleased. And if Biddy's unhappy with me, well, she'll get over it, and so will I.
Well, Biddy did in a period of time what others couldn't, what others didn't. Women were not in a role, and especially in Egypt, which I find so fascinating, that Egypt, of all places, would be the birth of all of this, and even the reinforcement of all of it as it got started. Our understanding of Egypt and the environment, which has changed radically over the years, both prior years and present time, doesn't seem like the logical launch pad for this devotional. But that seems to be Biddy, that the circumstances do not determine her altitude or attitude in any regards. We've been talking with Michelle Ule, author of Mrs Oswald Chambers, the woman behind the world's best-selling devotional. I think Biddy finally gets her due. She finally gets elevated to the position of, let's know who the woman behind the man was, because she was the Oswald Chambers of the utmost, my utmost for its highest, as the transcriber and the one who made it available and took the time to make sure that these incredible words of Oswald Chambers were preserved for the last 91 years and are reaching tens of millions of people every single day. I know it was a daunting task for you to capture her within these pages, but you did a most beautiful and eloquent job. So thank you, Michelle Ule, for sharing Mrs. Oswald Chambers, the woman behind the world's best-selling devotional. Thank you so much for being with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you.
God bless you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.